Sense Weekend is here.
Drive home with Rob Rinder.
Live, loud, listen. Rinder Talk.
Don't get nicked listening to anything else.
Rob Rinder on Talk Radio.
Good afternoon. If you are driving home, I hope you're keeping to the speed limits and following all laws. I've just heard that apparently I am the lawyer to go to in the event that you commit a crime. Actually, I'm not the right person. We've got Michael Mansfield, who's going to be here later talking to us, and you need to listen to him. He's been on every significant case and defended pretty much every person of interest in the last 20 years. But between now and then, we're going to go over to Professor John Christopher Buer, White House correspondent at Real Political News, for our weekly postcard. And there's been so much to get through. And of all the people I've missed since being in this chair, the Prof has been my main miss. What is going on stateside, Prof JC? Firstly, there was the January 6th Commission report, which is worth having a talk about, not least because there's an important anniversary today. Am I right?
Yes, today, by the way, lovely to see you. You
Nice to see
look
you too.
fabulous. We missed you. I missed you terribly. I know your fans have. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the second impeachment of former President Donald Trump for incitement of insurrection.
Uh-huh.
Now, this is an important word because that phrase is another phrase similar, but many of us get it confused with the phrase, and you're a lawyer, so you'll know, seditious conspiracy. These are two phrases, and the seditious conspiracy charge, and he's been arrested. This fellow, the Oath Keepers, name is Stuart Rhodes. He's in Texas, and he's been arrested by the federal government and charged with that. And we don't know where the bottom is going to be, and we know he's planned, and the indictment is chilling. It lays out a plan to use force, amassing weapons near the Capitol to stop the lawful transition of presidential power, and the plan to organize in advance of January 6th and through January 6th and through the inaugural, and to an American whose whole concept, we're supposed to be a shining star for the world. The concept of presidential change of power is what makes people actually want to come here, aside from the Constitution. And this has blown it wide open.
Well, Prof. Jesse, I have to put the thoughts of my listeners, and, there's a lot of people that feel that what happened on January the 6th, in terms of its description and in terms of Trump's role in it, has been overstated. And not just that, but it was notable to some commentators that when President Biden made his statement about the commission's report, he specifically didn't name or mention Donald Trump. To what extent do you think that's significant? And to those out there saying this wasn't an insurrection, this was a bunch of, I'm putting it in this way, it's not other people's language, a bunch of turbo weirdos really kind of acting on a whim of their own, not necessarily aided and abetted by the president. What's your response to that?
Well, this is proof right here in the edict that it was not in fact that. It was, in fact, a seditious conspiracy, and the Department of Justice has come up with that. This was a plan to overthrow the government. And all those right-wingers and those right-wing talk radio and conspiracy television shows, and I know plenty of them, were out saying, "Oh, where's the beef? Where's the sedition? Where's the connection?" Well, it's there, and Justice and Merrick Garland absolutely and finally came up last week to say everyone is going to be responsible. We're going all the way, and this is it, and it's being uncovered. And now many of the people in Congress are terrified that they will have to testify, and this is going to be quite something. And here's a little anecdote about Joe Biden not mentioning Donald Trump. I know Joe Biden for almost 30 years.
Right.
He did that on purpose. He wanted to really get his goat. By not mentioning Trump, it must have driven Trump crazy.
Well, I don't agree with some of the things you said, but one of the things I've always understood is I'd never really been able to understand the strategy of the anti-Trump movement, whether that came from the old Republican Party or the Democratic Party. He wants attention. The best thing to do politically was always to ignore him. And in fact, the more oxygen you give him, the more powerful he becomes. So we've got to move on. There was a case that a lot of our listeners will be very interested in, which I'm certain would have passed a number of them by in your Supreme Court. It was a 6-3 ruling, which in effect outlawed firms of over 100 employees forcing their employees to have vaccines. In other words, the Supreme Court, the highest court in your country, said that that was unlawful. That was a very, very significant case. What does that mean for the American public moving forward?
Well, this is the Supreme Court has overturned the occupational health and safety mandate,
right,
requiring all companies with 100 employees or more to all get vaccinated. The Supreme Court, which is protecting that, thought this was too broad a federal overreach. And this is part of the Department of Labor.
Right.
That was a downer for Biden. The plus side for Biden in terms of the SCOTUS ruling was that the Supreme Court upheld the vaccine mandate for healthcare workers at hospitals and healthcare providers who accept federal funds because of the connection to Medicare and Medicaid, which is part of the Health and Human Services administration.
So just to be clear, Prof, this is very, very important, right? Because this may end up in our Supreme Court here. It hasn't yet been legally tested, and I suspect there are a number of lawsuits pending, or certainly people that are getting the funding together in the event that the government were to mandate vaccines. As you know, we have a Conservative government who, at the moment, don't look like they're going to go down that road. But in Wales and Scotland, that is the case. And as I say, I suspect there may be a number of judicial reviews that are brewing. Just forget, they said if you're a private firm, you cannot force those companies to force their employees to have vaccines. But if you accept federal funds, and if you're a healthcare employee, the government does have the right to force you to have a vaccine, or to put it in a better way, a more lettered way, to say you can't work here if you are unvaccinated.
Exactly. The difference is in the congressional grant of power to these two various different agencies. As a Clinton appointee, I worked at 3 federal agencies, and the administration of those agencies and how they get their funding and how they get their budget has a lot to do to determine what actually how they can mandate any rules going through. Right. And the expertise of the 2 agencies and the breadth of this regulation. Clearly, HHS, which is Medicare and Medicaid, has to do with the protection of those healthcare workers and the individuals under their care. Yeah,
can we move on to one last point, one last issue, I should say? President Biden's approval ratings have been down in the dumps for a significant period of time. Vice President Harris's are worse. Yeah, and one of the things that could give them an upswing would be to get some important legislation out there. As a number of critics, both on the right and frankly in the center of the Democratic Party, that say that Biden's moved too far to the left. And one of the things he wanted to do was make critical changes to the voting rights law, and he didn't have the votes in the Senate to do that. Firstly, can you explain to our listeners exactly what that means and the fact that he's failed, what the implications are?
Well, honestly, I'm very fond of the man. However, he may have waited a bit too long to be successful here. There are 3 proposed laws on the federal level, and none of them seem likely to pass. In order to pass these voting rights laws, without any GOP votes, the Democrats need 51 votes to change the Senate rules. And Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, now infamous, have opposed that. Right now, 60 votes are needed, Rob. Yep. 50-50 Senate, which is evenly split. Now, the John Lewis Voting Act is one, and the Freedom to Vote Act is the other one. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act would make it illegal the various voting rules that discriminate on the basis of race and language or ethnicity, and it would empower voters to challenge these laws. And the other one, if I'm not getting too wonky here, the Freedom to Vote Act sets some national standards for elections on identifying minimum numbers of early voting, paper ballot trails, et
Can
cetera,
we
et
just
cetera.
focus on that? Because I think a lot of people don't really kind of understand that in this country. Because you are a federal nation, what people need to get is that the requirement to vote, even in a presidential election, may be different in Florida than it is in Arizona, as it is in Texas, which to many people outside of the country doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, imagine this, Rob, and this will give you all the folks who travel to the States, and we welcome when this is over, the pandemic. We all come over and we'll all have a good old time. It takes 5.5 hours to fly across the United States. We have 50 different states. We have 50 different state cuisines and languages. You don't understand each other, and 50 different voting rules and 50 different liquor laws and gun laws. Everything is broken down that way. That's why it's so difficult. And that's why the Supreme Court doesn't want to federalize things now that it's conservative, and that the states' rights people are working like crazy to make sure they get their rights. But unfortunately, in places like Florida and Texas, with those very conservative governors, they're forbidding mandates, they're forbidding vaccine mandates, mask mandates. It gets crazy. But that's the price you pay for having a federal republic.
Well, the price you pay, some people would argue that it's also the price that you pay for being able to choose what part of the country that you live into. As ever, clear, concise, to the point, enlightening and enlightened. It is our Prof. JC with his postcard. We'll be listening to him next week. I'm Rob Rinder, and it's now time for a break.
Good talk.
Hot talk.